I swear to God, if this game is bad, I'm gonna lose my mind. I honestly think the Spyro series is out to get me. Using the original trilogy as a springboard, I jumped into the rest of the series that I had yet to discover. And what I discovered was a nightmare. It was kick to the balls after kick to the balls after kick to the balls. There were some games that weren't that bad and that I actually somewhat liked, but then straight after that, 2 more colossal kicks right to the man milk factory. I'm starting to think that maybe overall, the Spyro series isn't very good. I can see the Reignited Trilogy on the horizon. I know that greatness is waiting. But before I can suckle at that sweet reignited nectar, there's just one more corner of the series to explore, and that is the Legend of Spyro. As I understand it, the Legend of Spyro is its own trilogy of games that serves as a reboot of the series. I don't know how it connects to the other Spyro games, or if it's an entirely separate canon, and honestly, I don't really care. I just want to play a good game. That's not too much to ask, is it? Let's be beginning this new beginning with The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning. Let the new beginning begin! Upon watching the opening cutscene and taking in what was happening, the thing that struck me the most was starring Elijah Wood, along with some other well-known actors. My immediate thought was, that's probably where the budget went. This is going to be a shit show. When did I get so cynical and pessimistic? I should probably work on that. I put that thought aside and went into this with an open mind. Along with rebooting the series, The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning also reboots Spyro's origin story. Not that he really had one to start with. When the Dragon Temple was under attack by the Dark Master's forces, Ignitus, a Dragon Elder who was tasked with protecting the eggs, only managed to save one, Spyro's. He took Spyro's egg away from danger, placed him inside a mushroom head, and sent him adrift down a nearby river where he was found, adopted and raised by a family of dragonflies. Spyro grew up alongside his brother, Sparx, believing he himself was also a dragonfly. Now, I don't mean to make fun of anyone struggling with identity or appearance issues or anything like that, but come on, Spyro, how could you not doubt being a dragonfly when you barely have any of the characteristics of a dragonfly? You're a sentient being who can think. Did the cogs in that brain never turn? Did you never have any of those existential questions? Did you never try and figure out why you were so different from your supposed brother? Did Sparx not question any of this either? Are you stupid? Anyway, Spyro and Sparx are out playing when Sparx is captured by these baboon things, and in his attempt to free Sparx, Spyro accidentally breathes fire. This is where Mummy and Daddy reveal to Spyro that he isn't a dragonfly, and that his true home lies elsewhere, and within a matter of seconds, he decides to leave the swamp and find that home, kicking off his first adventure. Sparx tags along, and together they conveniently and almost immediately stumble into Ignitus, who reveals Spyro's origins and his destiny, and encourages him to rescue the other Dragon Elders, and stop Cinder, another dragon, from opening some portal somewhere and unleashing the power of the Dark Master. As a story, it's kind of generic. There's nothing wrong with it, but I feel like I've seen this exact story many times before. Even Spyro: A Hero's Tale is pretty similar. They both involve evil dragons controlled by a Dark Lord, using a dark power, and rescuing Dragon Elders and all that stuff. There's nothing that really sets them apart. That said, A New Beginning takes itself far more seriously. The stakes are higher, there's an air of hopelessness and despair among the characters. It feels a lot grander. And the way it's presented is pretty full on. It's very, years ago we were attacked by the forces of the Dark Master. I failed to protect the eggs. I was too late. The only one I managed to save was you, a purple dragon. The one that was foretold in the ancient prophecies. Spyro, it is your destiny to defeat Cinder and stop the Dark Master from destroying the world. There's a lot of that. I admittedly did get impatient, like I get it. The fate of the world is at stake. Spyro's the only one who can do it. Okay, let's fucking get to it already. A New Beginning is the first of a trilogy, so there is more story to come, but as it stands here on its own, it's nothing special. We've all seen something like this before, and I didn't find myself particularly invested in it. Spyro's character is also a little different than it was before. In earlier games, he has a cockiness and a confidence that is missing from this version of Spyro. In A New Beginning, Spyro often doubts himself and has this melancholic unworthiness factor to him that eventually evolves into him embracing his destiny and mustering the courage to take down this threat. It's not an obvious change, but you do notice it as the game progresses, and I think Elijah Wood did a decent job of portraying Spyro in this way. And then, by stark contrast, Sparx. Sparx is the only other returning character from the Spyro series, and honestly, what the fuck happened? I have never felt so much ferocious, vicious hatred for a video game character in my life. Not even Bubsy was this bad. In previous games, Sparx never really was a character. He made his little buzzing noise, had a few lines here and there, and that was it. He was always more of a gameplay mechanic than a character. I respect and appreciate that they attempted to give Sparx a personality in this game, but I do not respect or appreciate how much they fucked it up. In this game, Sparx is not only hideous, he is also infuriating. His personality is a mix of snarkiness, bitchiness, and assholery, with an attitude that ruins the whole vibe this game was going for. He's supposed to be the comic relief character, but all he ever does is complain about the general circumstances and make fun of Spyro's weight and just constantly be sarcastic. He's so unlikable, and the worst part? He never stops talking. He goes on and on and on and on and on. Even when he has no reason to say anything at all, he'll say something. Spyro, we're not in Kansas anymore, shut the fuck up! On top of that, all of Sparx's lines sound improvised and half-assed. I feel like they either went with the first take every time, or just let David Spade say whatever the hell he wanted, and put that in the game. This version of Sparx is one of the worst things I've ever seen. Every time he was on my screen, I wanted to punch a hole in it. I can't imagine what it's like to be Spyro, putting up with that day in and day out. It must drive him insane. No wonder he was so keen to leave home as soon as the opportunity presented itself. Whenever I review a game, I take notes in a notebook. I usually only make note of something once, unless my opinion on it changes later on in the game, in which case I'll make another note reflecting that. Otherwise, I only note it down once, just one time. For this game, I had 6 separate notes where I talked about how much Sparx was pissing me off. To quote, I hate Sparx in this, he's awful. That was the second thing I wrote down, the first being Elijah Wood? Fuck Sparx, I wish Sparx would stop talking. I hate this version of Sparx. I'd rather fight Sparx than those baboon things. Sparx is really pissing me off. He's probably what I hate most about this game. I don't know how much clearer I can make it. Sparx in this game is terrible. I want to tear off his wings, use his spindly body as a toothpick, shred it into tiny pieces, and leave them to rot in a landfill. Fuckhead! Anyway, presentation-wise, A New Beginning falls into that same generic area that the story does. It has generally basic and uninspired locations, with the exception of Munitions Forge, which I thought was fucking awesome. I liked the volcanic mines and the railroads and the industrialness of it. I know that makes me sound like an 8-year-old, but let me enjoy it, okay? I've gone through a lot of shit. Do I need to bring up Sparx again? Because I will. I'm a ticking time bomb, motherfucker, and I'm ready to blow! The music I barely even noticed. It had that main leitmotif that popped up every so often, which was mystical and enchanting, but the rest of the music, I couldn't even tell you what it sounded like. It was that forgettable. I don't mean to imply that any of it was bad, it was all decent enough, but it wasn't anything praiseworthy. This series has certainly seen and heard a lot better. Now that that's all out of the way, we can talk about the game itself. Spyro's origins, world, and story aren't the only things that have been rebooted in this reboot. The gameplay has taken a different form as well. For most of its entries, Spyro has been a series of non-linear platformers focused on exploration and collecting things, up until Shadow Legacy, which did literally everything else in the worst way possible. A New Beginning takes the platforming aspect of the series and puts it on the back burner, instead focusing on combat. This game is a selection of linear levels filled with enemies that you have to deal with through combat, and you can usually only progress once all enemies have been defeated. In the early stages, I thought the combat was going to be shit. The only attack button is circle, and there is only one combo. Circle, 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 circle. If you want to be fancy, you could do circle, 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 jump, circle, 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 but that's just an extension of that same combo, and it doesn't even work on every enemy. My initial fear was that the combat would only be mashing circle, and while that is technically true, there is a bit more to it than that. Spyro also has his elemental breath abilities, and I have to be honest, I think this is the best implementation of these elemental breaths so far in the series, because they actually make things different and change the way you play. Your first breath is Flame Breath. and it is the most boring one. It just does raw damage without really stunning your opponents or allowing for any follow-up combos. I suppose it is useful for dealing damage while closing the distance between Spyro and his target, and you can also launch firebombs to attack from an even greater distance, but not much more than that. There is also a limit on how much you can use because of Spyro's green magic meter. The only way to recharge that is by picking up green gems dropped by enemies and breakable objects. Fire was not very exciting, which is strange because I usually enjoy burning things. That said, unleashing my first Inferno was pretty wicked. By collecting enough purple gems, also dropped by enemies and breakable objects, Spyro can perform a very powerful attack that covers a wide range and basically kills all enemies in a single hit, and if not, it comes pretty close. So that's cool. But all of the other elements can do that too. Of the elements, fire is the least impressive. The other three elements, electricity, ice, and earth, all add something different to the combat table. Electricity is the second one you unlock in Dante's Freezer. Electricity breath initially seemed like fire breath in a different colour, but once you're trained by Voltaire, you finally understand the true meaning of electricity and why Nikola Tesla was a god among men. Electricity breath has the power to fling enemies in a different direction. I had plenty of fun with this in Tall Plains, throwing these baboon creatures off of ledges and killing them instantly. It was pretty funny. Additionally, Electric Breath's version of the firebomb will suspend enemies in the air, allowing Spyro to follow up with an aerial combo. This is what I'm talking about. Combat that's more than just mashing. Combat with flexibility. You love to see it. You could say it's made the combat electric. Get it? Because it's Electric Breath? And it's made... yeah, you get it. Next is Ice. Standard Ice Breath has the power to slow down enemies and even potentially immobilize them temporarily, allowing Spyro to capitalize on it with his only combo, circle, 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 jump, circle, circle, circle. After being trained by Cyril, Spyro can also use Ice Breath to shoot ice spears and attack quickly and efficiently from a decent range, sometimes even mowing down enemies in a couple of seconds. Very useful in certain scenarios where you wouldn't want to engage with an enemy up close, for whatever reason that may be. And finally Earth, which is also wind for some reason. Earth is the last one you unlock, so you only get to use it towards the end of the game, which is unfortunate for two reasons. The first is that my totally legit Sony PlayStation 2 struggled with the final levels, so my experience with it was slightly ruined by that, but also it meant that you get to spend the least amount of time with Earth Breath, which is a shame because it's probably my favourite one. Standard Earth Breath is this powerful force blast that does some decent concentrated damage, but it starts to get fun after Spyro is trained by Terrador. Earth Breath's equivalent of the firebomb is a tornado that holds enemies in the air while doing damage to them, similar to the electric version. But once you upgrade them, sweet mama Jesus. On top of red gems which restore health, green gems which restore magic, and purple gems which charge up Spyro's super fuck you attack, enemies and breakable objects also drop blue gems which grant Spyro experience. Spyro can use this experience to level up each elemental breath and their respective triangle button projectiles. This makes them more powerful in various ways, like increasing damage, being able to turn enemies into snowballs, and fling them around a bit further. But when you upgrade the Earth Bomb to its maximum, holy shit! This attack is broken. Not only can it hold up and trap literally every enemy in the game besides bosses, but it also does a shitload of damage. Smaller enemies die in a single hit to this thing, and bigger enemies take a sizable amount of damage from it. And if they survive it, you can just trap them in a second one and they'll be dead. That's without Spyro also attacking them, which you can do to maximize damage done. I found myself genuinely chuckling and having a good time, as I just continually caught enemies in these uber-powerful tornadoes and just watched them fall over and die, even if I had to do it in slow motion because my totally legit Sony PlayStation 2 was having trouble. There was literally nothing they could do to fight back. Unexpectedly, it was a lot of fun. Nothing makes me happier than a helpless victim's slow and painful death. The electricity, ice, and earth breaths without a doubt carry this game's combat. They were the greatest source of fun for me, and they made the later levels much more enjoyable. They even made me partially forget about how poorly this game is actually structured. The levels themselves are actually not that bad. There aren't very many of them, but they're fine enough. They aren't designed in a way that's infuriating or frustrating in any way. They're just fairly basic linear paths with some platforming and puzzles sprinkled in. But their main purpose is to facilitate combat. Like I said, the elemental breaths, excluding fire, caused me to forget how badly this game is structured. Dante's Freezer, for most of which you only have fire available, demonstrates exactly why these levels are flawed. The vast majority of this game is combat. While the combat itself is very primitive, with only one combo chain and not a whole lot besides that going on, it could be a lot worse. The problem comes with how much of it there is. The combat in this game is constant. Each level is broken up into smaller areas, and each area is filled with a ridiculous amount of enemies. They just keep coming and they don't stop coming. This one particular area in Dante's Freezer is the perfect example of this. I was sat in this one area killing enemies for 6 minutes. Just the same types of enemies over and over again for 6 minutes. I could have made 3 hot chocolates in that time, maybe even a 4th. You've no idea what I'm capable of. And each level is full of areas like this, where you just plow through wave after wave of identical enemies with strange names like Darua Panther Dreamer, and Maple Tooth Honey Maple, and Rackado Jackal Quester, and Tickle My Throbby Knob. I made that one up myself. If the enemy encounters were half as long, you'd still have a decent amount of combat, and the levels wouldn't be anywhere near as much of a slog. Because of these frequent and never-ending enemy encounters paired with a very, very, very basic combat, a lot of the game's main gameplay is extremely repetitive. You do your one combo over and over again until all the enemies are dead, which can take forever because there are so many of them. And most of them are just the same baboon enemies every time. What is with the baboons? Why are they so intent on helping Cinder? I don't understand. Is there some genetic relation between baboons and dragons? If there is, who impregnates who? This game spends ages going on about Cinder and the Dark Master instead of answering the real questions. Who are the fucking baboons, and who's fucking the baboons? The elemental breaths did make things more interesting as the game went along, and as a result it did get more fun, but that doesn't fix the problem, it just distracts you from the problem. Even in the final level, while I was having a lot of fun with my broken tornado bomb, I did find myself noticing that the enemies would just not stop coming. The level, and by extension the enemy encounters, went on and on and on. If you aren't one-shotting them with the fully upgraded tornado bomb, you're just mashing circle. I liked the parts where you had to solve puzzles and do a bit of platforming. I liked this railroad section with the steam train. The occasional flying segment helped to shake things up as well. But that makes up such a minuscule percentage of the game. When games have too many things going on that distract you from the main gameplay, I accuse said game of having Year of the Dragon syndrome, named after Spyro Year of the Dragon, who is guilty of exactly that. A New Beginning has the opposite of that, where the primitive and repetitive gameplay takes up too much of the spotlight. The elemental breaths did help, but not enough to fix the issue. You can't just zap your problems away with electricity, no matter what Nikola Tesla says. The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning is a very flawed game. There are issues with pretty much everything it tries to do. The story and presentation are quite generic, as are the characters apart from Spyro and Sparks, but don't get me started on Sparks again, we'll be here all day. The combat is very primitive and repetitive, having only a single combo, and the levels are designed in a way that drags it all out and makes it even worse. The elemental breaths were fun to play around with, and I liked the occasional platforming and puzzle segments, but they were few and far between, and don't make up for what most of this game is: repetitive, never-ending combat. After beating the game, I guess I'm confused? It just wasn't what I was expecting. To be fair, I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. I'm seeing repetitive gameplay, I'm seeing a lacking story, world and characters, I'm seeing generic presentation, but I'm also seeing potential. The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning on its own is nothing special. It's fine, but I wouldn't recommend it. There's too much wrong with it for it to be worth slogging through. Saying that though, it is the first of a trilogy. There is more to come, and with some changes here and there, this formula could turn into something decent, with a bit more depth to the combat, with some more interesting level structure, with some more individuality and personality to the story and presentation, and with a lot less of this fuckhead. The Legend of Spyro could become something great. I am seeing potential here, and I am genuinely curious to see how this trilogy evolves, but as it stands, The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning probably wasn't worth beginning in the first place.